Academic politics are so vicious because the stakes are so low. That is a quote that I see all over the place. It gets quoted to me all the time, and I think it's a little bit unfair. Academic politics are complicated. They're sort of intertwined with the system that the academics need to work in, with ego, with prestige, with money, all of it wrapped up. Now, arguably, the stakes for some academics, the perceived stakes that is, are very, very high. Now, remember that an academic is really sort of like trying to find new information, be the first person in the world to find this certain thing. Now, that stake is pretty high if you ask me. The perceived prestige of being the first person in the world to find out something, to be one of the most sort of like recognized scientists in a certain field are pretty high stakes. So sure, there's not much money involved, sure, most research means that people aren't dying, but the stakes are relatively high if you ask any academic. Their whole life's work is wrapped up in what they're doing. The grant applications they put out, they are representing and pushing forward their entire life's focus, and when that doesn't get funded, that seems like a massive punch in the face. Academic politics are incredibly vicious, but I would say it's because the academics themselves feel like the stakes are actually very, very high. In academia, the common politics are actually not that vicious, but they kind of exist all the time at a low level, behind the scenes. Common areas that involve politics are access. Now, this was one that I really sort of felt from an early stage, even as a PhD student. Each academic has their own equipment, their own expertise, access to knowledge, access to money, and they are very, very protective about who gets access to that. One time, I went into an actual collaborator's office and said, "Could I have access to one of your instruments?" And she turned around and said, "No." And then, 10 minutes later, she kind of calmed down a little bit, come into my office and said, "Where's that bit of paper?" and signed it, and I got access, keycard access to that room. And I think that initial reaction is trained into academics. Like, no, what do I get from this? What is in it for me? And if they don't immediately see that giving something away, access to money, to access to instruments, access even to their PhD students and postdocs expertise, if there's not something immediately in it for them, it is a no. And once that happens a number of times, you start getting cliques, you start getting relationship broken and formed. And if you don't give me access, I don't give you access. That's only one tiny area that I saw it kind of at its most vicious. The next common area is names on a paper. So research produces data and conclusions that are sort of sent into the world on peer-reviewed academic articles that are submitted to journals. You've all seen it, Nature, Science, and others. Those are the most sort of well-known ones. Publish results of science now and research. Now, the thing is that if you have contributed in a significant way to that research, your name should be at the top of the paper. One of my papers had something like 13 names on it at one point, and getting your name on a paper is so important because that means that it counts towards your academic output. Then you kind of, get judged on the amount of papers you've produced in a given year over the lifetime of your work. And therefore, getting your name on a paper at almost any cost is worth it. Not only that, but on a paper, the first and the last positions are the most important. The first and the closest to the front you can be essentially means that you have done the majority of the work or contributed the most to the paper. And the last name in the big long list of names, that is normally the corresponding author, the supervisor, the head honcho that got the money. Often they are just the gatekeepers to the money. They've got the grant and they're just sort of like, paying for the research really. But as you get from the ends to the middle, the prestige decreases. So the person smack bang in the middle of the names has contributed the least, normally. At least that was the convention in my area of research, which means that there is a political jostling for trying to get your name to the outsides as much as possible. The closer to the front, the better. No one wants to be the cheese in the academic sandwich, right in the middle. So politics exists there as well. Another place I've seen politics play out is when you are applying for a grant and you put other people's names on that grant. Now this could be a whole video, could be a series of videos on its own, but essentially a principal investigator will also put on other investigators on the grant. Now, the great thing about being named on a grant is that that grant money accounts towards your research income. So you want to get your name on as many research grants as possible. But of course, the principal investigator needs to see you as valuable enough to put on their review or their grant paper. Here's the thing. If you are a new academic and you don't have many sort of like successful grant applications to your name, people in the institutions that I worked at would not put you on because they saw you as a liability to their grant getting funded. And so that is just crazy to me. You can't actually get your foot on the academic ladder because you haven't got your foot on the academic ladder. And therefore, there's a lot of people that aren't named on grant applications, and therefore they never have money next to their name that they have brought in, their research funding money, which, flies in the face of why younger academics should be included. Fresh knowledge, new ideas, up-and-coming scientists are quite often left off and then not named on the grant application. You can imagine all of the politics that arise around that. Infighting, different sort of if I put your name on, you put my name on, and then once you've got a good reputation of getting research money, then of course it just snowballs from there. So it really is just a political nightmare to try to get your name on an academic grant, especially early on. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstoughton.com.au/newsletter. The link is in the description. When you sign up, you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks. Everything from the tools I use, the podcasts I've been on, how to write the perfect abstract, the perfect daily schedule, and more. It's exclusive content, only available for free, so go sign up now. Academia has so much politics because ultimately it is a zero-sum game. And what I mean by that is if someone wins, someone inherently loses in this system. Now, we are always trying to talk this round the other way, we collaborate, let's look for the win-win opportunities. But in reality, the system in which academics operate means that someone's getting the money or the kudos or the grant or whatever it is, and someone's missing out. And therefore, you have a lot of infighting. I have known the most vicious of politics come out when it comes to this sort of zero-sum aspect. If you get the grant, it means someone else has missed out on the grant, which means that the people reviewing the grants, they have their own allegiances and they are never, ever 100% sort of completely unbiased in who they give their money to. One of the worst situations I ever saw firsthand was when it was meant to be a completely anonymous review. And someone leant in and said, your grant will never get up, because they were reading that person's grant. And they just wanted that little bit of power play to be like, well, I'm not going to give it to you. It was absolutely diabolical. It was embarrassing for the person doing it, but also just soul destroying for the person who's just submitted this grant. That's not the way science and research is done. You don't have these little sort of personal digs. You wait till you receive the reports, then you can do the rejoinder and talk about why the reviewers may be wrong in their assessment of your grant. But I've seen that politics come out, someone with a little bit of power really kind of just for it to go to their head. Academia is so political because it is a very weird hierarchy. So each research group in a university, each sort of professor with their kind of pyramid, which is not a pyramid scheme, with a pyramid underneath them of researchers and students and masters and undergrad work, that's kind of like a little castle, and they need to defend that castle at all costs from other castles, even within the same department. Imagine a department with lots of different castles, and of course each castle is fighting for grant money, for reputation, for lab access, for the limited space that there may be within the university construct, just how many buildings and labs there actually are. That is one of the most hotly contested things I saw, where research supervisors and academics would fight for these labs and then really never fill them, but it was just about having the space. And so yes, these castles are fighting all the time for limited resources. And now imagine that this department operates within a university system with lots of other departments who also have their castles inside. And the thing is, the universities are set up so you've got like the vice chancellor, the deans of the school, and the academics. But within each sort of department, they also seem to want to set up these strange institutes. So there was the Nanotechnology Institute where I worked, and the problem is the head of that sort of research institute had like people under him, but the problem is one of the people under him was the dean of the school. And so I actually remember overhearing a conversation, and this wasn't the dean but with someone else, and the head of the Nano Center was trying to sort of say something and direct this academic in a certain way, and I actually heard them say, are you telling me what to do? And the other person was like, no, I would, not at all. So it's like, there's no hierarchy that really exists, and they confuse the hierarchy all the time. So you've got all these independent academics that are pretending that there's some sort of hierarchy and system in the departments they sort of like work in, but really everyone's out for their own. And you've probably heard the saying, trying to organize academics is like herding cats, and it's so true. Yeah, what a nightmare. And the last thing I would say is that the reason academic politics are so sort of vicious is because the money that gets injected into their research is kind of the breath that keeps them going. It's the fuel that allows them to work so many more years on their research. Now, the problem is this money is getting less and less each year. You only have to Google decreasing funding to find all of these different graphs. This is just a reality of the academic world. I hope that in the future, research funding will increase, but it only looks like it's on a downward trend at the moment. And unfortunately, that brings out the worst in people. The academic system can take in lovely people, like salt of the earth sort of people that would do anything for you, that are fun, they're kind of still got that glimmer of undergraduate in their sort of like souls. And then it can turn them into these bitter, twisted, unethical beings. And I've seen that duality in so many academics. They've got their like personal side, and then they've got their academic side. And the academic side is always tougher. It's always looking to be one better than everyone else. It's always looking for that zero-sum win. And unfortunately, that is just the reality of academia as it exists at the moment. So there we have it. That's why academic politics are so vicious. Let me know in the comments what you would add. What have you seen? And viciousness is one thing, but I think as a PhD student or as a researcher, staying out of it for as long as possible is probably the only way to combat this. And that's probably my only bit of advice for any younger researchers that are watching this. Let me know in the comments if you agree. And also, go check out academiainsider.com. That's my project where I've got my ebooks, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as the PhD Survival Guide. And I'll see you in the next video.